Imagine living your whole life sort of haunted by a silence, not knowing the deep, profound story that shaped your own parents and, well, shaped you too. And then, what if just one chance encounter could suddenly pull back the curtain on decades of unspoken history? A history of escape, survival, trauma. Today, we're diving into Julian Borger's I Seek a Kind Person, and this is much more than just history. It's incredibly personal. It's the author tracking down his family's escape from Nazi Vienna. And unbelievably, it all started with a small classified ad. Just so you know, you are experiencing a unique two-voice AI conversation powered by Google's NotebookLM, which we think allows for a deeper, more dynamic analysis of this book. And if you find this approach helpful, check out our YouTube channel, Mindful Moments. We offer more AI book analysis there, all designed to spark reflection and rational thought. We really believe it helps get at complex truths. So, our mission today is to uncover these extraordinary, often heartbreaking stories of children advertised in British papers, a last resort, really, to escape the Holocaust. Their individual story, they shine a light on survival, on resilience, but also on the long, long shadow that trauma can cast. So let's start with the author's own quest. Julian Borger wanted to understand his father, Robert, a man described as serious, melancholic. He died by suicide and, well, he never spoke about his past in Vienna. And then came this revelation that his foster parents in Britain called him Bobby. It hinted at this sort of hidden identity, right? A stranger almost.
Absolutely. His own family only knew the bare bones. Escaped to Vienna, age 11, 7 months after the Anschluss. His mother got a maid's visa, couldn't live with him. Father escaped later. Beyond that, nothing. Just a void.
Such a heavy silence to grow up with.
And it was a chance encounter, really, that sparked the whole investigation for Julian Borger. He was working on a deportation story back in December 2020. Exchanging emails with Ruth Hargrove, a retired law professor, and they discovered both their fathers had escaped Vienna in 1938, just like that.
Wow.
And what really struck him was Ruth's honesty. Her father, she said, never recovered. PTSD, Alzheimer's later, reliving the Anschluss. Her words, Hitler's gift continues. That must have hit home, you know, that sense of inherited trauma.
Yeah, that phrase, Hitler's gift continues.
Yeah.
Chilling. And that pushed him to dig deeper.
It seems so. He then contacted Richard Nelson, the Guardian archivist, on December 29th, asking about this family story, this rumor of an ad. And the very next day, incredibly fast, Richard emails back an attachment, a cutting from the Manchester Guardian, August 3rd, 1938.
And there it was.
Right in the middle. I seek a kind person who will educate my intelligent boy. Aged 11, Viennese of good family. Borger, 512 Hinzerstrasse, Vienna 3.
Just like that. His family's past, in print. What a moment.
Exactly. And it wasn't just his family. That single ad became a key, unlocking the stories of scores of other children advertised in the same way.
And this was before the Kindertransport.
Yes, that's crucial context. The Kindertransport saved thousands later, starting near the end of 38. But before that, these ads, costing a shilling a line, were one of the very, very few desperate options parents had left. The Manchester Guardian alone carried ads for 80 children, almost all from Vienna. It really shows the sheer panic of those months.
So what was the Vienna they were so desperate to escape? The book paints a picture of a vanished world, doesn't it?
It does. Habsburg Vienna. It was a place where Jewish people had genuinely thrived. About a tenth of the population, but a huge percentage of doctors, lawyers, business owners. Robert Borger's great-grandparents, Johann and Hermine, they adopted Viennese names like many did. There was this period under Emperor Franz Joseph where Jews could finally integrate and succeed.
But it wasn't all harmony, was it? There were undercurrents.
Oh, definitely. George Mandler, another child from the ads, he remembered anti-Semitism as a constant background buzz, always there. The Nazi Party was banned, but active underground, people wearing swastika pins inside their lapels, a sort of hidden threat that many perhaps chose to ignore or underestimate.
And the economics and politics were turbulent, too.
Hugely. You had hyperinflation wiping out savings in the early 20s. Leo Borger, the author's grandfather, lost his bank job. His family ended up in Red Vienna social housing, these impressive workers' palaces built with special taxes.
Right.
A symbol of hope, maybe, but outside. Political violence was escalating.
Right, the clashes in the streets. And then Dolphus, the chancellor, he made a fatal error, didn't he?
He did. Instead of potentially uniting with the Social Democrats against the rising Nazi threat, he crushed them in a brief civil war in 1934. 5 months later, Austrian Nazis, taking orders from Hitler, assassinated him. He thought he could maintain a separate Austrian fascism under Italy's protection. A terrible miscalculation.
It seems almost unbelievable, then, that more Jews didn't leave before the Anschluss. The book mentions the Jewish population actually grew.
It did, strangely enough. Many seem to believe they could write it out, that things wouldn't get that bad, or that their businesses, their lives would somehow be spared. In 1934, even with Hitler making his intentions pretty clear, only about 1,700 Jews emigrated, while nearly 3 times that many actually moved to Vienna, a kind of tragic optimism, perhaps.
Until March 11th, 1938, Schwarzenegger's farewell speech. Gott schütz Österreich. God protect Austria. And then chaos.
Instantaneous. The hatred just exploded onto the streets. Chants of Ein Volk, ein Reich, and Führer. German troops marched in, welcomed by cheering crowds. The speed was terrifying.
George Mandler's memory of it is so vivid, watching the planes.
Yes, he was sick in bed with pneumonia, watching German planes swarm the sky. He described this cloud of anxiety and foreboding. And the shock, the real shock, was seeing classmates suddenly turn on Jewish students, legitimizing these latent beliefs that had always been simmering below the surface. That fear, he said, never left him.
And then came Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass in November 38. That must have felt like the final turning point.
Absolutely. It wasn't just broken glass and burned synagogues. It was state-sanctioned terror unleashed. For people like Gertrude Bacha, another child from the ads, it felt like the trap closing shut. And right after that, the systematic theft, the Aryanization, kicked into high gear.
Like with Radio Borger, the family business. Overseen by Adolf Eichmann himself, Leo Borger reduced to just Dear Jude, the Jew. Pure confiscation.
Pretty much. Eichmann perfected this system in Vienna, the Vienna model, to efficiently strip Jews of everything before forcing them out. The pianos from Radio Borger, everything liquidated for the Nazi state.
But some tried to resist, even in small ways, like Gertrude Bacha's father.
Yes, Adolf Bacha. He knew he'd be robbed, but he tried to salvage something. He cut a side deal, selling his business cheap to a local grocer for a tiny stipend. A desperate attempt to retain a shred of control, unlike Leo Borger, who was just ground down by the bureaucracy.
And alongside this systematic theft, there was random, terrifying brutality. The roundups. Dachau.
Yes, the Dachau lottery, as the book calls it. Men rounded up, taken to a police station, given a number 1, 2, or 3. 1 meant you go home, 2 meant forced labor, 3 meant Dachau. Sometimes they only came back as ashes. That constant fear, that randomness, it forced people to consider absolutely any option to escape.
Which brings us back to the escape routes. The Westbahnhof station, described as the gullet spitting out unwanted citizens. A final grim view of Vienna for so many.
And the Jewish Community Organization, the IKG, they were in an impossible position. They actually encouraged placing these ads in foreign papers like The Guardian, seen as maybe more sympathetic. They felt they had to become accomplices in their own erasure, just to give some families a chance to get out. The desperation is just palpable in those small ads.
And Britain specifically had this need for domestic workers.
It did. That created a particular niche, openings for refugee women and older girls. Like Alice Hess, advertised at 14 as an unpaid domestic servant. Omi, Robert Borger's stepmother, she took cookery courses to prepare for exactly that kind of role, a life below stairs. Housewife magazine was even running articles about the foreign maid. It was a very specific, limited window.
And the journeys themselves, perilous.
Absolutely fraud. Omi and young Bobby sharing a train compartment with Nazi officials, having to be polite, hiding their terror. Then the Nazis give the Heil Hitler salute as they leave a salute forbidden to Jews.
Or George Mandler's train being turned back for the new J stamp on passports.
Right, that red J, ironically, a Swiss suggestion to help them identify Jews at the border. And Gertrude Langer sleeping right through a massive Liverpool air raid on her ship, the Sua Maru, woke up to the all clear, totally unaware. Incredible stories.
And the ingenuity of the parents trying to save something, anything. Leo Borger hiding gems in his shoe heels.
Or Adolf Bacha staging clumsiness to smuggle gold bracelets in a sewing box, risking everything for these tiny seeds to plant in a new home, as the book puts it, small acts of defiance against total ruin.
So these ads were placed, these journeys undertaken.
Yeah.
What happened to the children? Let's talk about their individual fates. Robert Borger, Bobby. He ended up in Wales.
Yes, Carnarvon with Nans and Reg Bingley. A left-wing intellectual couple, they seemed very welcoming, but his initial fear was immense. He misunderstood a walk with a friend as a threat. And years later it came out he'd been found crying uncontrollably during Kristallnacht, unable to explain why at the time. The trauma was deep, even if hidden.
He was academically brilliant, though, under Reg Bingley's guidance.
Extremely. Went to university early. But then, this crisis of confidence, he failed his first year at Cardiff. It shows how fragile that adaptation could be, how the past could still undermine him despite his intellect.
His path contrasts interestingly with George Mandler's. Mandler also came via an ad just days before Robert. He became a prominent psychologist.
Indeed. Mandler studied memory, consciousness, emotion, maybe the sort of academic life Robert Borger dreamed of. George's experience included rough patches too, though. Awful food at one foster home, anti-Semitism from a teacher, but also profound kindness, like from the Isaacs family, his second family. And his wartime role was fascinating, a Ritchie boy, using psychology to interrogate German POWs.
But he always carried that sense of betrayal by Austria.
Deeply. He felt his youth was stolen, forced into adult responsibilities too soon. That sense of loss, of betrayal, stayed with him. It really shaped his whole outlook, gave him a kind of fatalistic view of life.
Gertrude Bach's journey seems particularly difficult. Her happy childhood ended abruptly. The chanting crowds affected her physically for life, and then those foster homes in Britain.
A real series of challenges. From the cold, unempathetic Annie Partington, who made her fear forgetting Vienna, to the kind but poor Katz family, and then, horrifyingly, a sexually abusive household with the Fishers.
Yet she found a path forward.
Amazingly, yes. She embraced Zionism, moved to Palestine, later Israel. It speaks volumes about her resilience, her ability to forge a new identity and purpose after so much trauma and instability, finding strength in community and building something new.
Then there's Alice Hess, worked as a domestic, married Richard Schoen, who carried immense guilt.
Yes, guilt over his brother and sister who didn't make it out, who perished. That survivor's guilt is such common, heavy burden in these stories.
And it echoed into the next generation, their son, Dennis.
Experienced anxiety and depression, what's sometimes called second-generation syndrome, the trauma passed down, even through silence. And Alice and Richard's escape wasn't the end of danger either. They got trapped in London during the Blitz, when the Atlantic route closed after ship sinkings like the Arendor Star, forced into engineering work, just constant adaptation to survive.
The Newman siblings, Siegfried and Paula, their father died in Buchenwald almost immediately. They faced hostility even from children.
Yes, being stoned in the street, called Jude. Siegfried ended up interned in Britain, ironically, at Hutchinson Camp, the artists' colony camp. Paula had a tough time with her foster family, the Lubovitzes in Liverpool.
They saved her, but weren't warm.
Exactly. She only found comfort in Siegfried's visits. He became everything to her father, mother, brother. But his internment and army service made meetings rare. Paula adapted, learned English, but eventually left the Lubovitzes. She needed more than just shelter. It shows survival sometimes means moving on, even from those who helped.
And the Schwartz brothers, Fred and Fritz, their story is incredible defiance, smuggled out.
A really daring escape to the Netherlands, only to be detained. But they stayed together, and their journey went right through the heart of the Nazi system. Westerbork transit camp, then Theresienstadt, that horrific Potemkin village for the Red Cross, and finally, Auschwitz-Birkenau.
Fred's tattoo on his forehead.
Yes, a number tattooed right on his forehead. He called it a rare ticket out because it marked him for transfer to a munitions plant, saving him from the gas chambers at that moment. Unbelievable.
And they survived, but reacted so differently afterwards.
Totally different coping mechanisms. Fred was all relentless cheerfulness. His motto became, revenge was to be happy and alive. Fritz, on the other hand, fell silent, never spoke about it.
That contrast is striking. It shows that there's no single way to deal with that kind of horror.
Precisely. Joy as defiance, silence as protection. Both valid forms of survival, really.
Gertrude Langer's story is another detour Shanghai. How did that happen?
An amazing, unsung story of rescue. The Chinese consul general in Vienna, Ho Fangshan, issued thousands of visas to Shanghai against orders, especially around Kristallnacht. Shanghai was a free port, so it became this unlikely haven.
And she thrived there.
She did. Worked in fashion, helped create this little Vienna within Shanghai. They endured hardship under Japanese occupation, even Gestapo cooperation, and the Hankou Ghetto later on, but most survived. Gertrude later became a successful designer in the U.S. Her view was powerful. Terrible stuff can happen, but if you can survive, you can still really thrive. Real resilience.
Elizabeth Weiss. Her parents had set chutzpah to send her away, clinging to hope.
Yes, that initial belief it might be temporary. Elizabeth was terribly homesick at first, but then developed this fierce determination to save her parents. Tragically, they were murdered in Mali-Trosnitz near Minsk. Elizabeth's journey afterwards was about healing, about accepting the past, but choosing not to let it define her entire life. A conscious choice to live fully.
So while these children found various forms of refuge, their parents, like Leo Borger, faced other dangers, even in Britain. Internment, as enemy aliens.
A terrible irony, fleeing the Nazis only to be locked up by the British because of panic about fifth columnists. Leo Borger was interned.
And those ship tragedies.
Yeah.
The Arendora Star, the Dunera.
Horrific. Ships carrying Jewish refugees, anti-Nazi Germans, and innocent Italians torpedoed or subjected to terrible conditions, sometimes alongside actual Nazis. It was these disasters, tragically, that finally shifted public opinion and led to reforms and releases. A real stain on Britain's record.
And the book touches on how this trauma wasn't just psychological, but potentially biological. Epigenetics.
Yes, the idea that extreme stress and trauma can actually change how genes are expressed, and those changes might even be passed down. We see hints of it in the second-generation syndrome, like with Dennis Schoen's anxiety and depression despite his parents' silence. The trauma echoes.
Austria's own reckoning with its past seems like it was very slow, very difficult. The first victim narrative.
That narrative, Austria as Hitler's first victim, rather than an enthusiastic participant, dominated for decades. It made acknowledging complicity, making restitution to Jewish survivors incredibly difficult. Former Nazis often stayed in power.
So returning wasn't easy for survivors.
For many, it felt impossible. Siegfried Neumann visited in 1946 and felt he was in a graveyard. George Mandler experienced anti-Semitism after the war from Austrians. Only recently has Austria started to confront this more openly with new memorials. The author getting Austrian citizenship in 2021 feels symbolic of that slow shift.
And we saw those different paths to peace again. Fred Schwartz being relentlessly cheerful.
While his brother Fritz stayed silent. Fred's own daughter wondered about his cheerfulness, if it masked something, or if her resentment was the second-generation effect.
It highlights that there's no single way to heal, right?
Not at all. And the author's own journey, reconciling with Vienna, seeing the city finally put up memorials, that engagement with the past seems crucial compared to the decades of silence.
Gertrude Bach's belief about the parents, that they were unsung heroes, that really resonates.
It does. Thinking about the sheer courage it took for Leo Borger and others like him to send their child away into the unknown, it's almost unimaginable. Driven by absolute desperation, yes, but also immense love. The author connects with that feeling, looking at his own son, understanding that primal need to protect your child, no matter the cost. It puts that small newspaper ad into profound perspective.
So these stories, they're about survival, obviously, but so much more. How trauma ripples through lives, through families, even nations. It's about courage, yes, but also the complex, often painful legacy of simply making it through. We really hope this conversation has given you some valuable insights, maybe a deeper feel for this extraordinary book, I Seek a Kind Person. As you think about these stories, Robert, George, Gertrude, all of them maybe consider what they tell us about history, about how resilient people can be, and the real power held within personal narratives. If this discussion resonated with you, perhaps subscribe to our podcasts. We do more explorations like this. And please share this unique analysis with others who are looking for knowledge for different ways to understand things. You'll find the link to purchase I Seek a Kind Person right there in the description, so you can dive even deeper yourself. But above all, we hope you continue to think critically about the past, how it echoes today, and about the incredible strength and fragility of the human spirit. Here's a final thought. The dead can't tell their stories, can they? So history often gets tilted towards the survivors, towards hope. But maybe this book reminds us that inside every survival story, there's often an unspoken tragedy. And truly remembering means acknowledging both sides of that coin.